take a moment, ask yourself, what do I truly desire? Not what I wish, not what I hope. What do I truly desire? Deep down in my heart, what do I yearn for? What do I desire? Ask yourself this. Abraham knew. Abraham thought about this. He says, desiring also to be one who possessed great knowledge. That was his desire. He was seeking further light and knowledge.
Welcome to the Gathering of Tribes weekly discussion of the Come Follow Me lessons. We're happy that you are joining us as we discuss the Old Testament. I'm Chuck Kay, and I'm here with Rachel Krause and our content expert, Brother Anthony Rivera. How's everybody today?
Doing really good.
Well, that's
Excellent.
good.
Good to be here. Ready to
All right.
go.
I have a comment from one of our watchers from YouTube. His name on here is COCJ Olds 65, and he must be a member of the Hopi tribe because he sent a question in Hopi.
Mm,
Luckily, I'm
I
Hopi, and
love
I
that.
could actually understand it was Hopi, but I don't myself. I'm not a native speaker, so I asked him, I said, I don't think Anthony Rivera understands Hopi, and I
mm,
barely have an understanding. Are you asking him where he is from? And he says, no. And his comment was like him, which I mean, I think he means that he likes this podcast and he likes you, brother Rivera. And he says, uh-oh, um, the old ways have both question mark. And so I was thinking about that because I've been looking at this comment for a while now, and to me, this is sort of like when the Savior came and he started this new dispensation of teaching from the old Hebrew ways and the Jewish ways. He taught something that was different from what they were learning in a different way, but yet he talks about all things that they knew. They knew the prophets, they knew Adam, and they knew Ezekiel. They knew all the people he was talking about, but it was in something in a different manner, and their understanding of all of this was different from what their traditions had told them. And so now they were faced with a new thing:
mm.
follow him and accept this new way, or do I just stick with the old way and get left out of the blessings that he is offering? And so I think that's just like today for us, at least for me as a Hopi. They have some wonderful teachings, and there's things that I can see that connect to the gospel, our understanding of the Savior, priesthood, marriage, just so many things are very, very similar. And so now I have to balance that, take those things from the old that are true about a savior, and about, like I said, some of these things about marriage and priesthood and all sorts of different facets from the old, and see that they connect with the new gospel that I understand today. And then don't throw out, I mean, I don't totally disregard the rest of it, even though it doesn't really fit in a lot of cases. But I respect that people have those beliefs. And I respect their ways and their ceremonies, that they are trying to do what they had been taught. And so maybe at some point they will come over and look at this and understand it better and connect those dots themselves. But yeah, I think brother, whoever you are, brother Olds, I guess. Yes, it's good to have both. It gives us a whole nother dimension of what the gospel really is.
And this it really is a great question about this balance between culture and religion and belief. I always tell folks, and this is the way I deal with it, and I may have said this before, that the Ahachman culture, where my ancestors have passed down to me. That's who I am. The and with all of the traditions, language, ceremony, and culture, and those types of things have all been passed down, and many of us have inherited these things, including culture. Um, but that's who I am. What I know and what I believe can can work together. It's just like the example you gave. The law of Moses, for example, which we haven't gotten to yet, right? We're not going to get to the law of Moses until we get to Moses. We're in Abraham right now, okay?
Yes.
And Abraham is going to has his own culture. It starts off with Abraham in his homeland. And the Lord appears to him and tells him, Abraham, I want you to leave your country, leave your people, and go to a place that I will lead you to. And this place will be a new homeland for you. Okay. Many native people can relate to that, right? Um, in movements and migrations and things like that, right? This is the whole story of the Hopi and Dene, right?
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
Uh, and so um, and so we're going to see that with Abraham. But my point is this: Abraham is going to leave his homeland, leave his language, leave his people, and even leave many of his family and ancestors to go somewhere where the Lord is going to lead him. And as he leads him there on this journey, he is going to be teaching him and covenanting with him and showing him that the things that he knew to be true in his cultures are actually fulfilled in the things that the Lord's going to show him, right? The bigger picture. And the law of Moses is just like that. You know, the traditions of over 1,000 years of the law of Moses were all there to try to teach the people and prepare them for the coming of Jehovah or the coming of the Messiah. Okay. Now, many of them recognized that, but there were many of them that did not, right? They held on to the culture
Mm.
and they didn't see the fulfillment or the balance in it. So when you see the fulfillment of the blessings of the Lord and the covenants of the Lord, then and the blessings of those covenants, then you will be able to balance the two. Okay. The Book of Mormon, the title page of the Book of Mormon says that, right? That one of the purposes of the Book of Mormon is to remind the Lamanites about the covenants that God made to their fathers, okay, and their
Mhm.
ancestors. Okay, that's one of the purposes, and we should pay very close attention to that. So we're going to see how to balance those things with Abraham and with others. But I do believe that there is a fulfillment and a balance between native culture, ceremony, and all these things, and the fullness of the gospel of Jesus Christ. We may use different terms, different languages to refer to them, but they do connect. Me personally, I still and knowing that allows me to do ceremonies still, right? And but to see the ceremony now as a bigger picture with more light and knowledge and understanding. Oh, okay. Now I understand why we're doing
Mm.
this ceremony. Now I understand why the creator is so important. Now I understand about the blessings of these creations in this world and of the cosmos. I get it now at a greater level. So it's a great question. I'm glad we should get more questions like that
Yes.
from
I
our
really, really
listeners.
like that. And I think it's so first of all, Uscley, thank you for to Brother Olds for asking that question because this is a question that I hear over and over again
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
from Native people.
Mm-hmm.
I do work with the Indigenous youth quite a bit, and this is
Mm-hmm.
one that they really struggle with. This is a
Mm-hmm.
important question. They want to be true to their culture and their heritage, but they also want to be true to the gospel and how
Mm-hmm.
how you do that can be difficult. And can you do that is a question that weighs very
Mm-hmm.
heavily on their minds. So I
Mm-hmm.
really appreciate that we had a chance to talk about that today because
Mm-hmm.
it's really
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
Very
Very good.
good. Yeah. All right. Jumping into the lesson. This lesson covers Genesis 12 through 17 and Abraham 1 through 2.
Mm-hmm.
The title being To Be a Greater Follower of Righteousness. And Anthony mentioned before, about covenants. This is very much about covenants, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that is the path. We need to be that follower, and all those things are part of these covenants. So, um, the begin in the lesson, one of the first things it asks is, "What is the Book of Abraham?"
Mm. Yeah, these are really good questions, and a question I think that a lot of folks have. Let me just start by saying the Book of Abraham is a revelation. It's the inspired version of these chapters in Genesis that have to do with Abraham, 12 through 17. Okay, and there's a lot happening within those chapters. It gives us the background and the inspired and it's like the book of Moses we've been dealing with. It's like the book of Enoch, right? In the book of Moses, these are revelations. Now, I know we call it a translation, but Joseph Smith didn't have any record that he was actually translating. He has papyri. He has Egyptian papyri, and on that papyri, these are excerpts of what is known as the Book of the Dead, right? And in these papyri, Joseph is studying them and looking at them. He doesn't know the language. He doesn't learn the language. It's not like Hebrew. He was learning Hebrew. It's not like the Book of Mormon language where he was given the gift to know that language, right?
Hmm.
This is different. This is different, but he's using the Egyptian papyri as sources of inspiration to receive the revelation that is the book of Abraham.
So it's
Okay?
almost like paper seer stones.
Kind of. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put it. He's using the papyri as sources of inspiration, kind of like seer stones, right? Those are instruments that cause inspiration and revelation to come. Okay, so a lot of people, and then when you get to the facsimiles, you know, Egyptologists will say this isn't correct because what it actually says in the Egyptian
Yeah,
writing doesn't say what Joseph Smith said, and that
right.
is correct. That is correct. Joseph Smith is not translating these things; he is using them again as sources of inspiration. Now we learn within the text of Abraham that Abraham spends a lot of time in Egypt, right? The Lord commands him to leave his promise or to leave his homeland in Ur, which is way far away. That's in Mesopotamia, what we know today as Kuwait area, right? Is the traditional site of Ur. There is another possibility that Ur can be another place a little bit farther up the Euphrates River in the land of Aram, where he ends up. But either way, he leaves his homeland, goes, and the Lord leads him into the land of Canaan. Now, remember, Canaan is the name of Noah's grandson. So we have to connect our dots from last time to today, right? Remember, Noah has three sons, Ham, Japhet, and Shem. Okay, and so the land of Canaan does not belong to the descendants of Shem, and Abram is a descendant of Shem. It doesn't belong to him. The Lord is going to give it to him as part of the covenant. So he has to and as soon as he gets there, he has to go into Egypt. Okay, so he spends a lot of time in Egypt, and this is where the Egyptians maybe have received a lot of their teachings and their temple teachings and their cosmological teachings and creation teachings are phenomenal. They're almost identical. And we learn that in the Abraham text when he starts talking about Egypt, that the Egyptians had the knowledge of the covenants, but they did not have the authority
Right.
to bind them. And so we learn a lot from Abraham. So in short, the book of Abraham is a revelation that is coming and that's being restored.
Yeah,
Uh,
that second question, Rachel, is very much connected to this, what we just learned, right? Can you read that?
Yeah, let me pull that up. I got off I got off track a little bit here.
Oh no.
As I often do as I'm looking at things and going down the rabbit hole of information because these Come Follow Me lessons are so comprehensive, and I think it's amazing to see how many different ways you can go with each lesson.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But
In fact,
there is but everyone's having the same questions. And
yes,
that first question, so what is the Book of Abraham? Where is it coming from and why are we using it?
right.
Is a good place to start.
Yeah, and Rachel, I'm sorry, it wasn't the second one, it's actually the third one.
Okay, I'll have you read that one and then
Okay,
I'll do the next
it
one.
says, what are the facsimiles in the book of Abraham?
Yeah. Yeah, the facsimiles are excerpts. At least two of them are excerpts from the Book of the Dead. Okay,
Hmm.
but they've been remember the papyri that Joseph Smith receives is very fragmented. There are parts missing. So on some of them they're filled in, and many of them are typical vignettes or pictures of um, common Egyptian pictures
Hmm.
that are religious, trying to tell different things. So they've been adjusted. Now, the church still has these papyri and makes them available to folks to study and to see. And there's been a lot of commentary done on them that's really good. Um, so one of them, the round one, have you seen that round one?
Yes.
Hmm.
That round one is called a hypocephalus. That sounds like a disease almost, but it just means it was a round disc, usually made of wood, that was placed at the back of the head of the mummy.
Oh.
So when you were placed in the mummy casket, this round thing was on the back of your head, and your head would rest on it, and it would provide almost like a um, the disc of knowledge, if you will,
Yeah.
right? That is connected to your head. That when you went through the afterlife, you had all the knowledge that you needed on this little thing. And the other facsimiles are images from the Book of the Dead that were quite common about different things. Now they've been adapted. They haven't been translated in the Pearl of Great Price, but they have, or in the Book of Abraham, but they have been restored, if you will, on how they're being used
Hmm.
um, to help um, the deceased move through the afterlife. For example, if you look at the meanings, the restored meanings of these things, again, these are not translations; these are just inspired restorations of what they're portraying. Some of them you'll see they contain grand key words on how to pass through the afterlife, new names. Um, Patriarchal order type stuff and temple knowledge that the Egyptians had um, and understood quite well. Um,
It's interesting that these Egyptians had so much focus on the dead and the afterlife. There was so much of what
yeah,
they did, and worked for throughout their whole life, building themselves a place
Oh
to
yeah.
be set in when they die, you know.
I've been to Egypt many times and I've walked through their temples and they depict their understandings and they loved the afterlife. They couldn't wait to get there, right? And they wrote down in their pyramids, in their temples, and then they wrote them down in tombs, and then they wrote them down in coffins, and then they would write them down on papyri. So they wanted everyone to know how to get return to the Father in a ritualistic and a spiritual way. And they got it. It's almost identical to the way that Abraham describes it, how they had the knowledge, they had the covenants, and they had the rituals. They just did not have the authority
Right.
to bind them in a way that would be eternal. So it's fascinating. I'm taking a group to Egypt to see these temples
Mm.
in May of this year. We still have some room for people if you want to join
Yeah.
us. And I'll walk you through it. It's amazing. The temple at Karnak
Mm.
in Luxor is phenomenal, phenomenal.
You know, also in that one, the round
Hmm.
image, when Abraham describes some of this, he's talking about he's laying on this sacrificial table.
Yeah.
And there's a little story there before that that I had never really thought about. And to me, it's very profound. He talks about the daughters of Oneida and how these three virgins were asked, kind of like Daniel or Shadrach,
Hmm.
Meshach, and Abednego,
Hmm.
to suffer but if they would comply with their request, and they wouldn't have to suffer this, and the males survived their ordeal, but these females were all sacrificed,
Hmm.
and it was because of their firm belief that they wouldn't worship any other gods, and they were totally prepared to give their lives to say, we will not do this. We have a God and we worship him and none other, and we are not going to do this. And I just think about that story. It's inspiring to me that they know this is what happens here. And they said they sacrificed all three of them at the same time. They put them all on that sacrificial table or bed or couch or whatever they called it, and they sacrificed all of them. I
Yeah.
guess I'm in uh, awe or respect, or I don't know what to call it,
Yeah.
admiration for these young sisters who had their whole life ahead of them, but
Hmm.
were willing to sacrifice that to be true to God.
Yeah. Yeah. We have to understand that Abraham's world, this is around 2000 BC, give or take, a couple hundred years, but um, you have to understand that that time was volatile. I mean, we saw it in the scriptures at the time of Noah, and then at the time of the Tower of Babel. Um, Abraham is around that time, and the world is just incredibly volatile. And we see in the book of Abraham that it's also incredibly evil, that they're doing human sacrificing and people are suffering. And for the Lord to tell Abraham and to tell Sarai, let's not forget about Sarai, she's one of these young women who is also incredibly faithful, right? They
Yes.
pack up, the whole family packs up, and they believe what the Lord has told Abraham, that he will show them a way to a promised land. And as they head towards the promised land, they are taking the steps literally on their journey, but also taking the steps via covenants, right? Because in chapter 12 of Genesis, and even in Abraham, we see it also, the Lord is promising Abraham. Because remember in chapter 1 of Abraham, let me just share something there because it has to do with the theme. It says that he's in the land of the Chaldeans.
Hmm.
Okay, this is that's a Greek way of saying the Kasdim in Hebrew. They say the Kasdim, and the Kasdim were ancient people who lived in Mesopotamia. At the residence of my father, he says, I, Abraham, this is Abraham chapter 1, verse 1, saw that it was needful for me to obtain another place of residence. And then we get verse 2. This is that famous one. And finding there was greater happiness. Now, this means that Abraham, or at this time, he's not called Abraham, right? Abraham's
Right.
his new
Abram.
name.
Hmm.
And we don't, he doesn't, he's not called Abraham, this new name, until chapter 17. Okay. So here in chapter 12 and in chapter 1, his name is Abram. Abram is his name. Okay. And he already knew happiness, but he gets this sense that there was greater happiness and greater peace and greater rest for me. He says, I sought for the blessing of the fathers. Now, these fathers are his ancestors, and the ancestors are the patriarchs. He's talking about the blessings that he heard about in regard to from Adam to Noah, and Noah passes them down to Shem. These are the patriarchs or the fathers that he's referring to. He knows about them somehow, he's heard about them, or he understands these traditions, and now he wants to experience and receive the greater happiness of the covenants that they had. Okay. And so he says, and the right whereunto I should be ordained to administer the same. This is that part that's missing from the Egyptians, right? They did not
Yeah.
have the right to be ordained to administer the covenant. But under the line of Shem and the patriarchal order, um, uh, Abraham knew that it could be obtained. And so he says, having been myself a follower of righteousness, so we know he's on the right path. Desiring, that's the key word. Not wishing, not hoping, but desiring. This is an important word, Rachel, desire. And ask yourself, take a moment, ask yourself, what do I truly desire? Not what I wish, not what I hope. What do I truly desire? Deep down in my heart, what do I yearn for? What do I desire? Ask yourself this. Abraham knew. Abraham thought about this. He says, desiring also to be one who possessed great knowledge. That was his desire. He was seeking further light and knowledge. Okay. And he desired it. He yearned it in his heart. Okay. And then it says, and there's more, to be a greater follower of righteousness. There it is, Chuck.
Hmm.
A greater. It means he was already a follower of righteousness, but he knew there was more. There was higher knowledge, and there was covenants, higher covenants that would help him be a greater follower of righteousness. And there's more. This is great. We're learning what's in his heart to possess a greater knowledge and to be a father, a patriarch also, a father of many nations, a prince of peace, and desiring to receive instructions and to keep the commandments of God, I became, he says, because that was his desire, I became an heir. In other words, by desiring this, the Lord blessed him and gave him an inheritance, he says, to be a high priest. Okay. holding the right belonging to the patriarchs.
That was one of the questions. How did Abraham receive the priesthood?
There it is. Okay. Now that tells us that he desired it and that he did obtain it. But the question there is, well, how did he? We have to go to chapter 14 of Genesis. Okay. Now we have to understand Abraham, or at this point, Abram. Let's call him Abram first.
Okay.
Abram was not born a prophet.
Okay.
He becomes a prophet, but before he becomes a prophet, he starts off just as a man. Somehow, some way, he learns about these things. Somehow, some way, he follows the true God Jehovah. Somehow, some way, the Lord is working with him. Somehow, some way, he has to grow in his faith, right? He takes this journey, okay? And then once he gets to Canaan, okay, in chapter 12, he's only promised to receive the covenant. Doesn't receive it. He doesn't receive it until chapter 15. But in chapter uh, 12, he's promised what we know as the Abrahamic covenant.
All right.
Okay. And then uh, he becomes first a leader. Well, he's a husband first. Well, first he's just a man. He becomes a husband to Sarai, and we have to talk about Sarai also. Such an incredibly faithful and powerful woman,
Yes.
Sarai. So he becomes a husband. He wants to be a father, but he's not.
Right.
He's 100 years old and not
Yeah.
Yeah, you would definitely think that your time has passed at that point.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then by chapter 14, he becomes a general. He's a warrior. So he's a shepherd with a flock. He's a warrior in chapter 14 because remember, he gathers this small little army of 300 men and he goes after the great kings of Mesopotamia to
Yeah.
rescue his nephew.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think
remember
that's
that?
such a great example of how our Heavenly Father can make you into what you need to be. He
Yes.
didn't start off as a warrior or, the leader of men like that, but
No,
he followed God and
that's right.
God helped him be what he needed to be.
That's right.
And and also,
We have to remember that Abraham and Sarai are on a journey.
right. And
Okay.
the other thing that must have been a little tough for him was his father, I guess maybe started out as a righteous man, but he ended up being an idolater
Yeah.
and had him, basically put on that altar to be killed. And
Yeah.
so he and his father is still along and he's kind of in and then he's kind of out. He has these things learning from the Egyptians, I guess, that
Hmm.
that this was they professed all of these things that the Hebrews knew, but they again, like you said, did not have the authority to do any of those things. So
Right. Now, where's the authority? This is our question. So,
yes,
where is the authority and how does Abraham get it? Okay. Well, in chapter 14, after he rescues his nephew Lot, he rescues all these people. He defeats these great armies. How? Of course, with the help of God. Okay. Uh, he he reports to the presiding patriarch in the city of Shalem. Okay. Sometimes we say Salem,
Salem, yeah,
right? Shalem, which is the city of peace. And there he finds a king and a priest by the name of Melchizedek. In English, we say Melchizedek, right?
right,
Yeah.
Well, Melchizedek is a title. It means Malki means my king, and Sedek means righteous. So Melchizedek means my king is righteous. Okay. And it's a title because if he's the presiding patriarch and the main authority at the time, he's in Salem, which is going to be later on, it's going to be called Salem
Ah, very
or
good.
Jerusalem.
Jerusalem. Yes.
Okay. And he's a king and he is a priest and he has the authority. This is where that episode of chapter 14, when Abram meets Melchizedek and Melchizedek blesses him, right? And they have this sacred meal, right? Bread and wine, right? They go
Yeah.
through this ceremony and this is where Abraham receives his authority from Melchizedek. Okay. So now he has authority that he's been seeking, a high priest ordained by a high priest. And then he is able now to return to his homeland. And then in chapter 15 of Genesis, the Lord starts Abraham on this covenant path. And this is where we start to see the covenants, the signs, and the tokens, and all the formulas. We saw it with Noah, but with
Right.
Abraham, chapters 12 through 17 is where we see covenant making being revealed, where we see temple ceremonies being established, where we see the covenant formula being revealed in the Bible. Very similar to what we see that was restored in temples today.
I love that.
That's awesome.
So it leads to our other questions. So that answers that one. What else do we have, Chuck?
Well, basically, many people hear this word covenant, and so what was this covenant that God
Mm,
made with Abraham?
yeah, that's a good question. This Abrahamic covenant. We've all heard that before,
Hmm.
correct?
Yeah, we've all heard the term, but what does it mean?
What does it mean? Very, very good. Well, the Lord reveals, he promises Abraham the covenant, and then he reveals it to him and enters into the covenant with him in chapter 15. Okay. Now, the Lord, there's a covenant formula, if you will, and we saw it first with Noah, now we're seeing it with Abraham. And that is, Abram's going to build an altar first in a holy place. Okay. And then the Lord appears to him and tells him uh, who he is. He reveals himself to him, right? So the parties are always named in covenants, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then the Lord will tell Abram what the terms of the covenant are. In other words, this is how I'm going to bless you. And he's going to bless him with four things, okay, according to the Abrahamic covenant. Number one, he's going to bless him with land. He
Mhm.
says, I will give you the land. He doesn't say you will take it. He
Right.
says, under covenant, I am going to give you this land, the land of Canaan, and beyond, right? Because he tells him this land doesn't belong to you. It belongs
Right.
to your cousins who are the Hamites. It doesn't belong to your family line, the Hebrews. Okay, it belongs to
Right.
the Canaanites. So it's not yours to take, and it's not, it's, he says, it's mine to give. And I'm going to give it to you as the first term of the covenant. Number two, he's going to bless him with a big family, posterity. And then he's going to bless him with authority. Okay. And then he's going to bless him with um, the ability to bless the families of the earth through that authority with the gospel. Okay, so those are the four terms of the Abrahamic covenant: land, posterity, authority, and blessing the families of the earth. Okay, so those are the main terms. Now, with covenants, these blessings are bestowed upon those who enter the covenant as long as they do the terms of the covenant. And most of the times the terms of the covenant is, will you do that? Will you do what I say? Will you keep my covenant? I'm sorry, keep my commandments and always remember me and
Right.
those commandments, right? It's really not that hard, okay? And you say yes or no. But let me say this, covenants always come with penalties for breaking the covenant. And these come in what is called, oftentimes translated as curses. So you have blessings and curses, or blessings and penalties. If you break the covenant, these are the penalties, you see. And so that's what the curses are. So he says, the Lord tells Abram, I will bless those that bless you. And he says, but I will curse those. And the translation in Genesis says, in Genesis 12 says, I will curse those that curse you. But it doesn't say curse those that curse you. In Hebrew, it says, I will curse those that treat you lightly, is what it says. Kalal, which means people who think this Abrahamic covenant is silly and make fun of it. He says people who treat it lightly, okay, even even the recipients of the covenant, if they treat it lightly, if they mock God and say it's not worth anything, then you're going to suffer the penalties. Okay. Um, so that's what the Abrahamic covenant is, and it must be received by way of covenant. And let me say one more thing, because it involves posterity, Chuck, sister Abram, Sarai,
Hmm.
has to be there.
Right.
Yeah.
Sarai receives the covenant also. And
Yeah.
they
I
and then the Lord gives them in chapter 15 the first law, okay? Law of sacrifice. And that's where you get that episode where he tells him, divide these animals, right, into
Right.
two and put them over here. And then he says, this darkness comes and he can see the light and he sees the Lord carrying some kind of a light, a torch or a lantern. And the Lord is walking through the covenant, showing Abraham the covenant path and the law of sacrifice. Now, in chapter 17, he's going to get Abram and Sarai are going to get the next part of the covenant, and that is new names and the law of obedience. Okay.
Yeah, let's definitely talk about the new names. Why new names? Why do we do that? Why did they do that?
Yeah.
Why do we do that?
Yeah.
This is something that we have, some we put some importance on as members of the church and, as
Yeah.
Native people, that's
Hmm.
something that often happens too within indigenous cultures. You're given
Yeah.
multiple names. So,
Yeah.
what is the significance of that?
Let me ask you first, Rachel or Chuck, what do you know about in our native cultures when one is given a new name or another name? For example, my Ahachiman name is Ashuna Haich, and that's who I am. Anthony Rivera is is who my parents named me for the world, but within the community, right? Within my amongst my people that they know me, Ashunahich, and it's a spiritual name, right? It's like a
Hmm.
new name, right?
Hmm.
So what are in different native cultures? I know every culture is different, but why would you have another name in our native culture? What do you know?
Me first, you first, Rachel. What do you want?
Um, I think there's a lot of significance because a lot of times it's associated with where you are in life or
Right.
your age or gaining new responsibilities or
Yep.
making possibly like covenant makings, that sort of thing where you're able to do some different things in life. So there's some association with where you are in your life
Hmm.
with that.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. What else, Chuck?
in Hopi culture, a lot of times you receive a new name at your different points in your life,
Right.
initiations. And
Right.
it has to do normally with the clan that you are being initiated into. And
Hmm.
so was initiated into the Arrowmaker clan.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so, unfortunately, I don't remember the name that was given, but it has to do with the pattern that the arrow. So when in Hopi culture, when they make arrows, they don't just wrap them and put the feathers on and throw them in a
Yeah.
pile. They
Yeah.
actually make a design out of the arrows once they complete them, and they put them in a some kind of symmetrical or artistic uh, organization there. And my name has to do with that. It has to do with uh, a pretty or very organized
Hmm.
arrow design. And
Hmm.
so I think that in the old days, that was probably one of your assignments. You know, you're in the arrow maker
Hmm.
clan, you're going to make arrows. You know, you're
Hmm.
going to do
Hmm.
this and
Yeah.
and distribute them. So yeah, I think they all have a reason, a purpose, and sort of a challenge to you to become good in that whatever you're called to do.
Hmm. Interesting. Interesting. Very similar. In chapter 15 of Genesis, the Lord tells Abraham, "You shall no longer, your name is Abram, Avram." And
Mhm.
Avram is the name that his parents gave him, right? His earthly name. Av means father, and Ram means it's often translated as exalted, exalted father, Avram. He says, "Your name shall no longer be Avram, but your name," and this is during the covenant ceremony, "your name shall now be known as Avraham." Av means father, Raham means of a multitude.
Oh, yeah, that's a very great name for him.
That's right. It's connected to the covenant. And that
Yeah.
tells us a little bit because let me ask you, Rachel, in chapter 15, does Abraham have any kids?
No,
He doesn't have any.
he's got zero.
He's got zero. But
He's going
yet,
to go from zero to a gazillion.
but 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 but
Yeah.
this new name is telling him who he is going to become and the way that God sees him.
And I love that he has faith because, I think if I was his age and I didn't have kids, I would be seriously doubting. I'm not sure that Heavenly Father knows what he's doing here. He says he's making this covenant with me, but I don't see it. Nothing
Yeah,
Yeah.
is happening. I don't see how this is possible. Given my age, given everything, how is this
yeah.
even going to happen? So I
A
love
multitude?
yeah,
Yeah.
Jesus,
a
I,
multitude.
I
Yeah,
don't
not
have
just one or
one.
two. He's not saying you're gonna, have one or two posterity. You're gonna be the father of nations.
Of
Um,
nations. Right.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I would be struggling to have faith at his point at this point.
And Abraham, bless his heart, he's learning and he is growing and he is progressing. And he realizes this is a promise that God has covenanted with me. He sees me as this. And what does he have in store for me? Okay. Well, Abraham just needs to be faithful and he'll find out. Now, Sarai, he says, and Sarai is also entering into this covenant. It's required that she is part of this covenant. He says,
Yeah.
Sarai, your name is, you have been called Sarai, which means my princess. Asar is like a prince, right?
Hmm.
And the female version would be a princess. Sarai means something like my princess. He says, but you shall no longer be known as Sarai. The way that I see you and your new name in under this covenant is Sarah. And Sarah
Hmm.
just means princess. Now, this could mean a couple things. Number one, her parents named her Sarai, which either she was just a great kid, and you know how you tell
Yeah.
I have a little granddaughter, she's my princess, right? Uh, maybe that's what it was referring to. Or, when they're back in Ur, maybe she was from a royal family. Okay. She has a
Okay.
sister, or or there's a relative, I think it's her sister, by the name of Milcah, which means queen.
Oh, okay.
So it, in my opinion, I'm doing research on this. It looks that Sarah's family might be royal, okay, because she acts that way. And then
Hmm.
and then the Lord tells her her new name is Sarah, princess. She's not a queen yet, but she's anointed to become one, right?
Yes.
And she's promised that she is going to be a mother of kings
Mm.
and of nations.
I love that because it does kind of remind me of Eve, with her name that she's was the mother of all living before she
That's
had children.
correct. That's correct.
Um, So I really really love that. And can we talk about Sarah for a little bit here because
Yes.
I
Yes.
watched this movie and I didn't like it because the whole movie was about Abraham and
Hmm.
Sarah
Hmm.
and I didn't like the movie because in the movie she was portrayed as kind of whiny. She was always mad at Abraham.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't think that's who she is. So
No.
I would
No.
love to hear more of your thoughts on
Yeah.
who she truly is.
Well, um the text of Genesis, you need to pay close attention to Sarah, okay? The princess. She acts royal. She doesn't mess around. She's not submissive. She's not angry. She's a woman, and she's not a perfect woman, but she's in this covenant now, okay? So in chapter 18, let me just go there. In chapter 18, it's all about the women. It's all about Sarah, and it is all about Hagar, another woman.
Yeah.
Now, remember before in chapter 13, they're in Egypt. Okay. And that whole episode when Abraham or Abram at the time tells the king and tells the Egyptians that this is my sister. Okay.
Yeah.
Remember that? Remember
Yeah.
that? And everybody always says, "Oh, Abraham is flawed. He's a liar and not righteous." No, that's not true. Let me just say this. In Hebrew, there's no word for niece
Hmm.
or nephew. You have to say the son or the daughter of my brother or my sister, or you just say my brother or my sister. For example, we know that Lot is Abram's nephew, right? And there are
Hmm.
times when Abraham calls Lot his brother.
Right.
He's referring to him as his nephew, but there's no word for nephew in Hebrew. Sarai is is likely Abraham's niece.
Hmm.
And so he calls her his sister because that's the word for niece, is sister or daughter of my brother or my sister, right? In Abram's case, my brother. Okay.
Gotcha. That feels very indigenous to me too, because, in a lot of, at least in Hopi culture, you don't really talk about your second cousins,
Yeah.
whatever. It's your aunts, your uncles,
Yeah.
mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, that's pretty much it. You don't get into the technicalities a lot of
No.
of the exact biological relationship.
Right, right. There's clan relationships, right? And
Mm.
Yeah,
so that's and you have to remember that the Hebrews are very tribal, okay?
right.
And so tribal people like ourselves can relate to this. Okay, they act tribal. They are just tribal. So that being said, in chapter 18, Sarah has she's the first wife. It says that Hagar is an Egyptian, and it says that it oftentimes says she's a handmaid.
Mm.
Hmm.
And I've heard even people say that she's a slave. Okay. But the word that is being used in Hebrew is this word shifcha. It says she's a shifcha. A shifcha is often translated as a maid servant or a
Hmm.
handmaid. Have you heard those before?
Yeah.
Those are all medieval. That's all King James medieval
Yes, yes.
translations, right? The word shifcha is coming from another word, and the word is mishpacha. It's the same word. You just add an M at the front. Shifcha, mishpacha. The word mishpacha in Hebrew means family.
Mm.
So the specific
Okay.
word shifcha, according to my understanding of Hebrew, and I'm an expert, is related to this word family. Hagar is not considered a slave or a servant. She's part of the family, even though she's Egyptian. So she's treated a little bit different. Okay. So the best translation that I've come up with for shifcha is not maidservant. It's not handmaid. It's not slave. It's definitely not slave. It's like an attendant, an assistant, but somebody who's in the family and has a little bit more clout and is treated a little bit differently than somebody who might actually be a slave, right? So Hagar is that way. Now, in the Midrash, which is the Jewish rabbis trying to figure this out, in the Midrash, it says that Hagar was the daughter of Pharaoh,
Mm.
which means she is what?
Royalty.
A
She's also a
princess.
princess.
The
She's
dam.
also a princess. And it says in the Midrash that Pharaoh, when Abram and Sarai leave Egypt, and he says, "Take your wife, just you guys just go," right? Because remember that plague comes upon them because he wants to make Sarai part of his harem, right? Part of his
Yeah.
royal household, one of his wives.
Yeah.
And then that plague comes upon them, and he
Yeah.
says, "What is going on with this woman?" Right? She has powers. And so the Midrash says that Pharaoh tells his daughter Hagar,
Mm.
go with them, learn from this woman, find out how powerful she is and her powers, learn of her.
I think that makes more sense to me than what I've know or learned before because
Yeah,
it didn't ever quite make sense to me that Hagar would be so jealous
yeah,
of Sarai. Why would she even think that she could have that station or be jealous of her
yeah.
unless she herself was a princess too.
That's
So,
right. That's right.
yes.
Can
Okay.
you see it
It's
now?
Mm.
yeah, the wheels are turning here. I'm
You've
But
my
it
solved
pieces
it,
are
doesn't.
Rachel.
connecting.
No, that's right. That's right. But it doesn't change the fact that Sarah is the first wife. And the first
Right.
wife in that culture 4,000 years ago had authority in the amongst the household. Okay? So, let me just say this. So remember, Sarah tells Abraham, husband, my attendant here, is going to marry you. Abraham doesn't tell Sarah that. Sarah tells Abraham this. So showing a little bit of her authority. She, you are going to marry her, and she will bring forth children in my behalf. And maybe we can start this covenant, the blessing of this covenant of being a father of a multitude. We can start here.
Hmm.
Okay. And so he marries her. Okay. And she conceives. Okay. And then starts the human part, right?
Yeah.
She
Yeah,
says,
the
man,
jealousy.
maybe maybe I can get a better position. Okay. And so long story short, this is all Genesis 18. She gives birth to Abram's firstborn son, Yishmael, or Ishmael, right? Yishmael means God hears prayers, right? And and remember, um, the angel, because remember, she conceives and she starts saying, I'm gonna have a baby now. And Sarah says, all right, you're out. Remember that? Remember that? She's gone. I'm not gonna tolerate I'm not gonna tolerate this.
Right.
And Hagar runs away, right, into the desert. Now, the name Hagar means to run away.
Hmm.
Oh, wow.
Her name means to flee. And where's she gonna go? Where would you go, um, Rachel? Where would you go if you were stuck in Navajo land, uh, for whatever reason, and you were fleeing? Where would you go?
Well, I'd probably try to go back home
You'd
first.
probably try to go back home, right?
Yeah.
Now, you might have to go through the desert, and her home is Egypt.
Yeah.
So she gets only so far, and then the angel appears. This is chapter 16 of Genesis. A, such a great chapter. The angel appears to Hagar, and the angel asks her some questions. From where are you coming, and to where are you going? Is that a great question?
Yeah.
If you've ever driven across the Navajo reservation, you'll ask yourself that because you'll see people walking along the road and there's nothing for
For
miles.
miles.
Yeah,
Where did this person come from
yeah.
and where are you going?
Those are the questions in the desert,
Yeah.
okay, of Canaan that the angel asks her.
Yes.
Anyway, long story short, the angel tells Hagar. He says something interesting. Hagar, the Lord is aware of you. He loves you and he's blessing you. But you have to return, he says, not to Abraham. He says you have to return to your Gibora, which means your mighty woman.
Mm.
You have to return to Sarah. There are things you need to learn from her. She says, yeah, but she's mean to me. And he says, just tolerate it and know this, the Lord is going to bless you. And then the angel tells her, you shall name your son Ishmael. So Ishmael is named by God. Isn't that interesting? And
Wow.
he promises her, he will be a great nation. Kings will come from him, and you'll be blessed. But you're going to have to deal with the afflictions sometimes. Sarah's learning, and she's growing. She's frustrated, but there's a blessing coming to her. Okay. So in chapter 17, um, she receives her new name. Chapter 18, let me just touch on this one, then we'll move on. In chapter 18 of Genesis, Three messengers appear. Remember? So let me just
Yeah.
take a step back. At the end of chapter 18, the new name, the next part of the covenant is given, and then the next law is given with the sign and the token. Okay? The sign and the token is circumcision. Okay? And um and the law of obedience is given. Trust me, you got to be obedient for that one. If at Abraham's age and all of his household's age, you know,
Oh, yeah, that would be rough for sure.
they're going to learn obedience quick, okay? And very painful, okay? But anyway, so by chapter 18, Abram it says it's 3 days later, and Abram's sitting in his tent just whoa, right? Right?
I'm
He's
sure.
sitting there, okay? And then three messengers show up. Isn't that interesting? And it says that Abraham runs to them.
That's
So
impressive. He's a
what?
hundred years old,
He's 100 years old,
and
Just been circumcised.
been
Yeah.
circumcised, and he
Yeah.
gets up and runs to him. Miracle.
Yeah.
Miracle.
yeah.
Okay. And he bows himself to them. It says that they're standing up above him in the air, right? And when they finally get to talk, they ask him a question. And this question I just love. They say, Abraham, where is Sarah? Isn't that great? Isn't that great?
Yes.
Where is Sarah? We have a message for her. And he says, she's in the tent. They say, we have a message for her. And the message is this: 9 months from today, she will give birth and will be holding her own son. And we will return when he is born. And they say, and then they bless them with more blessings, right? That's chapter 18. Okay, so you see all of these great things happening that have to do with covenants, have to do with covenant formulas, that have to do with new names, have to do with blessings, have to do with with posterity and with all these great things that the Lord wants to give. And they are the perfect example, the patriarch and matriarch of this Abrahamic covenant that is sealed upon all those who desire it in God's house, right? In his at any given day on this earth to this day. And his descendants are a multitude, right?
Oh, yeah.
And his descendants are blessing the families of the world.
Yeah.
You see how it played out?
Yeah. This
Yeah.
is awesome. Yeah.
I, you know, I love so much about these stories. One of the things that stood out to me is that, when they were given the commandment of circumcision, that it says that he did it the same day.
That's right.
That it was he immediately obeyed.
Yeah,
And I think that that is just such an amazing testament to how we should obey. Something if we are told, by the prophet or our church leaders in, whatever capacity or authority they have, if we're told this is something we need to do, we should be obeying and we should be obeying quickly.
that's right. And especially under covenant and the law of obedience. You
Yeah.
see, it's not one day I'll be obedient.
Yeah.
No, you better learn it now because you're under covenant for that law now.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe it's coincidence, maybe it's not, but 3 days later, the messengers come and tell him his wife is gonna bear a child after he makes this sacrifice and makes this covenant.
That's right.
I don't know, that would be a pretty strong coincidence. Um,
Exactly.
but I think it's awesome to, to know that we can be blessed for the sacrifices that we make.
That's right. That's right. It's not a coincidence. It was the blessing of the covenant. Okay. And it's so great. It's just so good. Um, we'll talk a little bit more about that next time
Yeah.
about chapter 18. I know I'm jumping the gun here, but
But it's good stuff.
these other ones are leading us towards the covenant, and then the fulfillment of the covenant begins in 18. What other questions do we have, Chuck? Did we go through
Yeah,
all the
we
questions
just
there?
went through all of them. Yeah.
We covered
Excellent.
everything.
Excellent. I'm sure there's more questions out there, again, this is a teaching. Abraham 1 and 2 and Genesis 12 through 17 is the Lord trying to show us. He's narrowing it down now to one family, and he's trying to get us to watch them and how the Lord interacts with them by way of faith, by way of their weaknesses, right,
Mhm.
and their forgiveness, and by way of the covenants and the blessings that He is going to give them. Okay, and He wants us to pay close attention and follow their lead. And again, if we so desire, which I hope it is the desire of so many people, to be a greater follower of righteousness, then these are the chapters to study
Yes.
to do that. And the Lord will bless you. And guess what? He will bestow upon you the same blessings that Sarah and Abraham received, the Abrahamic covenant,
Very good.
and seal them upon you in his holy house. I promise
Yes.
you. I hope that is the desire. And if you're wondering, well, I need to know more, again, starts with your desire, and then find out more. Start preparing if you haven't already done this. Start preparing to receive these great blessings in the Abrahamic covenant in the temple of God. Start preparing now. Okay.
Very good.
Yes, that is great advice. And yeah, yes, that's pretty much what you do in the temple is work on this covenant. So thank you for that. And if you have questions that we didn't touch on, please be sure to email those to me at Rachel@gatheringoftribes.org, or you can drop them in the comments and we will try to answer as many questions as we can get to. We hope you enjoy this, and we invite you to join us again next week by watching on the Gathering of Tribes YouTube channel or by listening on your favorite audio podcast platform. If you enjoy this podcast, please share it with your friends and family or take a moment to write a review. Not reviews not only uplift us, but they also help others find our podcast. Thank you for joining us. May your path be peaceful and enlightening this week.